Welcome to the Pat White Show. Today in New York City, one of the biggest crime syndicate organizations was, hit on by police and the FBI and everybody else in law enforcement, and it was released today. And it was monstrous. It dealt with two particular things: betting on the NBA and poker games. Now, let's be honest. Here in America, people bet on things. Whether it's sports, whether it's on racing, whatever it is, people bet. And when you have companies like FanDuel and all these gambling apps that are now so prominent that exist on your phone, on your internet, wherever it is, there's a chance things could be going bad. And it turns out the FBI, over a four-year investigation, discovered something really, really big. And basically what it was a gambling ring, and there was the FBI discovered there was a problem with the NBA players cheating. Now, here's what happened. The gambling ring had to do with organized crime. 5 crime families, 5 Italian crime families, had a deal going where they had poker games, high-stake poker games. We're talking millions of dollars poker games, where they had specialized machines, specialized cameras. There's even things that could read cards, specialized machines that could read cards, even X-ray type decks or X-ray machines that could read what the cards were. And someone could be sitting at a table wearing either special glasses or even special contact lenses. They could see the cards, see what they were, even when they were face down. Now, companies had to create this stuff, and companies had to install it. Did they know what was going to be done with this stuff that they were selling and installing? I don't know. But 5 families, 30-some people were arrested this morning, and it was a big event involving just the organized crime and millions of dollars in poker games. And some of these poker games are set up by very well-known people, like the coach of the Portland Trail Blazers. These people knew about what was going on. And then we have the situation with the NBA. And here's the deal. Someone bets on a game. There's things called prop bets, things that happen on the side. This person's going to do this person's going to do that, whatever. Prop bets. One player knew what was going on, and he was altering the prop bet situation. So if you were betting on the games, you may be taken. You may be cheated on because the players knew what was going on and they were cheating. Now, here's one player making $27 million a year, and he was getting like $200,000 cut of the deal. You're going to waste an entire $27 million per year earnings for $200,000? It's astounding. This goes deeper than anybody really realized. This is a monstrous case. Like I said, it involved 5 Italian crime families from New York. Just when you thought organized crime was dead, you find out it's not. But worse than that, the NBA now, their commissioners got to be worried, because with all these people betting on these apps that everybody has on their phones now, and the betting you're doing, you might be cheated in the whole thing. This could be millions of dollars that people think they're betting for real and have a good chance at. They're not. They're being cheated. So this came down today in New York City. This is a huge crime. But it begs the question. Now when you go to a game, you're going to think somebody in there might be cheating. Or when you bet on something on the app on your phone, you're going to worry that, somebody may be cheating. Or if you go one of those big-time poker games, you're thinking, has somebody got a way of reading the cards that I can't see? People were played for dupes. They were conned. One guy lost over $1 million, almost $2 million. In a poker game that he couldn't win because they knew what the cards were. And the machines that read it, these special eyeglasses, the special contact lenses, all high-tech stuff. Now, what about those companies that made that equipment? What about those companies that sold the equipment and installed the equipment? Are they liable? Should they be charged? Don't know. But that's where folks and things are going. You should know. So maybe if you're planning on betting anymore, maybe on the NBA or who knows what else, You don't know where the rest of the people have gone bad and things have gone bad. But now you've learned. And what we learned today was just the surface. We don't really know everything yet. All we heard was today, here's what happened. Big arrest, people charged. There was a NBA coach, players, and gambling. And all that was announced today, and it took nearly 5 years to find it all. And five families, organized crime families in New York, are basically involved in everything. If you think organized crime has gone away, think again. It has not. Well, the No Kings rallies were held once again this past weekend, and allow me to give you my observation on what I thought about those rallies and what I happened to see involving those rallies that caught my attention. One of the videos I happened to see was a bunch of people coming out of a nursing home. And I don't want to tell you where the nursing home was, it really doesn't matter. But I saw all these people coming out of nursing homes holding up these signs, these made signs, homemade signs, and coming out in wheelchairs and on walkers and crutches and what have you, all coming parading out of a retirement home, nursing home, call it whatever you want. And they were heading to the No Kings rally. So I decided I'd go, drive around, see what it was like, see what they were doing in downtown because we had the rallies going on. But here's the observation I had. Most of the people that I saw at the No Kings rallies were baby boomers. Now, I could talk about them because I'm one of them. All right? And I'm one of the oldest baby boomers. So I can still talk about them. But all those people I tend to see were mostly what I saw, baby boomers. Majority of the people I saw, yes, there were younger people, but by far, older people holding their signs up. These are people that I recall from back in the 60s. These were the hippies. These were the long-haired, freaky, whatever people. And they were holding their rallies. They were against whatever the administration was doing. These were the anti-war rally people. These were the anti-draft card people. These are all the people that I remember because I was there and I saw them do this stuff. It looks to me like these were the same people that were around in those years. And a number of the men had really long hair. It was gray, all right, or whatever hair they had. And that's what I was looking at. So it seems to me, from my perspective, most of the people I saw were elderly. And that means baby boomers. Yes, there were younger people. Okay, I'm not going to argue that. But that's what I saw for the most part. I didn't see it on TV. And I noticed most of the people on TV were, well, older and holding up their signs or placards, whatever they had. Now, there's one situation that happened in the city of Chicago. They had their No Kings rally going on, like all these cities do around the nation. And some folks from TPC, Turning Point Group, were going around Chicago shooting video of the rallies going on. And apparently a elementary school teacher who's now been identified, no names, elementary school teacher, she's around 40 years of age, she saw the Turning Point people coming around shooting the video stuff. So you know what she did? She pointed her finger at her neck and went, ah, laughingly, parroting Charlie Kirk being assassinated. She was laughing about it. It was funny to her. She thought it was amusing. Now, this is a person who is teaching children. Now, in the Chicagoland area, I don't know about you, but if I still had young kids, and I don't have young kids anymore, my kids are long gone. I mean, they're out there doing whatever they are with their kids. But my kids have their own kids. And fortunately, their kids, well, I don't know what they're seeing in their schools with their teachers. But this woman in Chicago, elementary school teacher, doing the imitation of Charlie Kirk being shot, assassinated, murdered, call it what you want, and mocking it because she thought it was funny. She thought it was amusing. And this is what we have in America. Here's what worries me about that particular generation. This is not the baby boomer generation. It may be generation Gen X, whatever you want to call it. But many people in that particular demographic want to see everybody who support one particular tribe, and I'm going to use the word tribe, dead. They want to see them assassinated. They wouldn't be worried about it. Now, should people be upset about the fact that Charlie Kirk was murdered? Well, there's a number who aren't. But let me ask yourself, would you, let's say somebody who you didn't think a whole lot of, as far as like a Don Lemon, former guy from CNN, or some big person on television or radio or talk show host or whatever it is, was shot and murdered? Would you be going around imitating that person being killed? Would you do that? I'm not so sure that I'd be interested in doing that. Yeah, I'd feel bad if somebody like that, got murdered, because people shouldn't get murdered. That's just the way I see them. I don't have to agree with everybody. There's people out there that I don't agree with. They could take staff on CNN, for crying out loud, and if one of those got murdered, all right, they'd be terrible, be sad, but would I make a big public showing about it? The answer is no, wouldn't. I don't know how many other people would do that as well. So I'm just trying to tell you that what I saw this past weekend of the No Kings murders, we don't have a king in America, folks. We don't. Because if we did have a king, my guess is there wouldn't be those kind of rallies, because he would have his henchmen out there, his knights or whatever, shutting that down and taking the people in who were involved with it, and they would disappear, because kings were known to do that. No, it's free speech in America. You got it. Use it as you want. But like I said, most of the people I saw were old people, the old baby boomers, the old hippies, and one unfortunate school teacher in the Chicagoland area imitating the assassination of Charlie Kirk and thinking it's funny and mocking it. That disturbed me. Don't know if it disturbed you, but that's my recollection. That's what I saw. And I'm telling you what I saw and how I felt about the No Kings gatherings, No Kings meetings, No Kings demonstrations that happened around the United States this past weekend. My thoughts, and my thoughts alone. Every year, the City Council of Fort Wayne has to go through a process called reviewing the budget, figuring out what we've got coming in, what we're going to spend out, and if we make the two balance out properly. Well, this year has been a little bit more difficult for City Council because of the SB 1, Senate Bill 1, which changed the revenue involving property taxes, what the city gets. So right now they're figuring out, they're going to be tough having any money out there and see what we can do with the money. Well, the mayor of Fort Wayne, Mayor Tucker, she's got a plan. She still has a plan to build a really big, dandy, giant field house on that property, the north of the St. Mary's River, that open area that used to be the OmniSource property. Wants to build a big field house right there. Says it's going to generate a whole lot of money and people are going to come in and use it and rent it and what have you. Well, the problem with that is that's a whole big amount of money to spend. And Russ Yale, who's on the city council, said, look, these numbers ain't matching up. Mayor wants to put in this big field house, spend a lot of money. We've already got a big amount of money we're having to spend for the riverfront we were already invested in. As a matter of fact, the riverfront, they already put in $51.5 million. We're still paying on that. And we'll be paying on that for the next 20 years until 2045. So, Mr. Yale's saying, maybe the idea of putting in a very expensive field house is going to cost, millions of dollars. It's not a good deal and not a good plan for this time when SB 1 is cutting back the revenue the city has to work with. Now, as you know, a couple of investors, Chuck Sirac of Sweetwater and a gentleman by the name of Daryl Doden, builder, I guess he is, whatever he has. Those gentlemen want to buy that property for anywhere between, I believe, somewhere between $8 and $12 million. $12 million for that property, considering the acreage, it's a pretty big sum of money. And if they want to invest that kind of money and pay the city of Fort Wayne that kind of money, wouldn't that seem to help out in the budgetary problems the city of Fort Wayne has because of SB 1? I'm just saying. Building a field house sounds like a wonderful idea if we had the money. We're already in debt to pay off the riverfront. Got to pay that for the next 20 years on the current part that we have. Do we want to invest a whole lot more money in building a field house that we cannot guarantee if it's going to be a success or earn money? You can't do it. Sorry, it doesn't work out that way. There's so many places and other opportunities that exist. But if someone's going to hand you, say, $12 million for a piece of property that may or may not have some issues with it underground because nobody really knows, to be honest with you. But if these private investors want to give you that amount of money for that roughly 25 acres or so that exists there, doesn't that make sense when you have an economic uncertainty going on in your budget going into next year? Well, Mr. Yale thinks can't do the both projects, can't have the budget and be investing in a field house with the economy the way it is today. So, logic says, let's talk about it some more. Let's figure out if doing the right thing, and maybe, Madam Mayor, that maybe we don't build a field house. Does Fort Wayne need another field house right now based on everything we have available? And things are being built by other investors. And shouldn't it be the job of private investors to build a property they can either make money on or lose money on, rather than using the taxpayer dollars? It's a very good point to think about right there, because I'm not sure the mayor could find the private dollars to build this property on somebody else. I'm just saying I don't think it's possible. Now, can something happen? Yes, anything can happen in today's world. But right now, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. And that bird in the hand is Chuck Sirik and Mr. Doden, who've got cash money to spend and give the city money. They're going to help the budget, especially because of SB 1. Something to think about, folks. It's your taxpayer money. Where do you think it should be invested or not invested? Do we need a new field house in downtown Fort Wayne? Just a question that needs to be asked. Or do we balance our city budget for next year? Well, the United States Supreme Court has just taken up a rather interesting case that may interest you. Here's the situation. A gentleman down in Texas, his name is Ali Hamani, was busted by police. They found him in possession of a handgun, and he admitted that he was a smoker. That means marijuana, in case you don't know. Well, anyway, the police said, okay, you're not allowed to have a gun because you're a drug user. And Mr. Hamani is saying, wait a minute, Supreme Court said otherwise. There is an interesting case, folks, that may affect everybody in the United States in one way or another. Because according to the Justice Department, 20% of Americans have smoked pot or are smoking pot, whatever that means. Now, according to the current law, in some ways, but it depends on the federal government, if you're in a possession of a handgun and you're a drug user, well, you're not allowed to have a handgun, and essentially it's a felony. Because you're a drug user, you can't have a gun. Well, the problem is a number of states around the United States, I don't know how many exactly, have decided to legalize recreational use of marijuana. Other states have use of marijuana for medical situations, but they still use marijuana, what they say is legally. Now, federal law still says that marijuana is a Class 1 drug, and has been that way for a rather long period of time. But the Supreme Court in 2022 said everybody can open carry constitutionally. It's a Second Amendment deal. So Mr. Amani is saying, wait a minute, Supreme Court says I'm allowed to open carry. But the other laws say, well, if you've got a gun and you're smoking dope or whatever you're doing as far as drug-wise goes, that you've committed a felony because you are a dope user, a narcotics user, if you will, in the possession of a firearm. That has created a very interesting case. Well, now that case has been accepted by the United States Supreme Court. Now, the arguments we heard probably earn early 2026, and my guess is they will have a decision around probably in the summer sometime. But it does create an interesting situation. Many states out there say, hey, we're legalizing marijuana, although it's still a federal offense. They just kind of going against the federal law and they don't enforce it. But the feds say, hey, you got a gun, possession of a gun, you're using dope, that's a felony. There's the rub. Two different versions of the same law. So, what's going to happen? Right now, nobody knows because the situation is kind of difficult. But I should point out that it could be changed by the feds, but they're still working on that 2022 ruling that said open carry. It's legitimate. Everybody has a right to do that if that's what they want to do. It isn't whether you're using drugs or not. And there is the rub. So, what will the Supreme Court do? Right now, it's everybody's guess. In the meantime, if you're one of those people, I suggest you be very, very careful. Well, most of you folks aren't old enough to remember this, but I'm going to tell you about something that happened to me and my family back in the 1980s. I had to attend a board of directors meeting in Chicago or in New York City every year for this board I was on. And then I thought one year I'd take my wife and my kids to see New York. The problem was my oldest daughter had a cold. The doctor said she couldn't fly. I was flying everybody to New York. So I said, okay, I'll put you on a train, which is exactly what I did. I booked a train, a nice room, if you will, for my wife and daughter to go from Fort Wayne all the way to New York City. And they did. I flew, they went on the train. Well, it took about 24 hours to get from Fort Wayne to New York, but you got on the Baker Street station back in the old days. That beautiful building in the train. Well, they got on the train. Well, that service on the passenger service ended around 1990 for Fort Wayne. I think you still go up to Butler and catch a train up there, but they're working on a new project. A new project they've been working on for a number of years. Jeff Paddock, a member of City Council, has been really big on getting this done. Well, they've now managed to come up with $650,000 to give to the Railroad Association as part of a 90-10% deal. 90% they pay and 10% the involvement of the cities and the states, showing this as a study. A study is being done to determine how much it's going to cost, what it's going to take, and all the particulars involved with having railroad service to run from Chicago, Illinois, through Fort Wayne to Columbus, Ohio, and ultimately up to Pittsburgh. It's about 550 miles. They say it'll service around 17 million people along that route could use it. But this is the study they're doing. This is the second step they have to do because, well, if you're a railroad, you're going to say, can we do this or not? Somebody needs to study it. And right now they're going to spend about $6.5 million to figure out, can it be done? Can they have a railroad service between Chicago and Pittsburgh? And is it doable? So that's what the money's for. So $650,000 has been contributed, and now the study's going on. I'm not sure how long the study is going to take, but ultimately, once they come up with the answers, it's going to cost X amount. It's going to require X amount. It's all the things that are involved in setting up a whole new rail line. Yes, there are tracks that exist. I'll tell you that. Everybody knows that. There are tracks everywhere. But can these tracks hold passenger cars? Mostly anything today involving railroad trains, I'd say 98% is probably freight. They're moving stuff all across the nation. These cars, these trains, that's what they do. They move stuff. But can you get passenger trains operating on the same routes or close to the same routes? Well, nobody's really sure yet, and that's why they're doing this study. Now, I'm not sure how long the study is going to take. They say, well, it could take about a year, maybe longer. I don't know. But once they complete the study, it'll tell them how much it's going to cost. The problem then becomes, well, even if they decide to do it, the federal government's going to say, okay, we'll pay 80% of it. You states pay the other 20%. And I don't know how much money that's going to be because it could be billions. Heaven knows what it's going to cost to create a train system between Chicago and Pittsburgh. Whatever it is, there's people out there who want to see it happening. But ask yourself this. Would you take a train from, say, Fort Wayne to Pittsburgh? Would you take a train from Fort Wayne to Chicago? Now, I will tell you this. There's already routes that can do those kind of things, sort of, in their own little particular style. You want to run up to Butler and catch a train going up that way. Yes, there's things like that you can do. But a regular service that operates between Chicago and Pittsburgh, and I'm sure there's stops along the way in the Plymouth and some of the other towns here in the state of Indiana, as well as towns in the state of Ohio, leading up to Pittsburgh. But Would you do it? And can America afford it? Traditionally, railroad service in the United States of America, especially passenger, is only cost effective around the East Coast, where people go from like Washington, D.C. to New York or whatever it is. They work on the East Coast. Passenger service in the Midwest, pretty sparse. Doesn't make money. So can Amtrak afford to do it? Can the states afford to pay for it? Those are the big questions that are now going to be answered. And this new study that's going on involving the potential of putting in a passenger service that goes from Chicago, Illinois, through Fort Wayne, into Columbus, Ohio, and ultimately to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 500 and some miles, able to serve around 17 million people. But will people want to ride? That's a good question that needs to be answered. And ultimately, when they come up with the cost, will the states be able to cover that cost in an era when money's getting tight, real tight? And do we need railroads running passengers when we have the interstates? Just saying, it's something to look at. And now the study is on, and ultimately we're going to find out how much it's going to cost. And then we have to decide, do we want to spend the money for railroads? Something to think about. Two very interesting lawsuits are happening in the United States, actually happening over on the East Coast, and they involve the President of the United States. Not that he's being sued or he's being charged with anything, but two people in government have been charged big time. One is former FBI Director James Comey. He's been charged in lying to Congress. And now what he has done, his attorneys have gone to the judge and say, Your Honor, the reason my client is being charged is because the president doesn't like him. This is vindictiveness by the president because of, what we did to him, and now he's trying to get back at us. So, Your Honor, we want you to throw the charges out against James Comey because the president is just going after him because he's angry at what we did to him. That's essentially the gist of what's going on in that one story. James Comey's attorneys are saying, yeah, you can't prosecute a guy. He's being maliciously picked on by the president because the president is seeking revenge. And in Washington, D.C., we don't do revenge. In Washington, D.C., everybody gets away with everything because one person gets caught, he's liable to say something about somebody else, and everybody else gets caught. So in Washington, D.C., there's no such thing as revenge. It's what side gets away with it because they know they can. Now, the other case going on in Washington, D.C. is a very interesting one involving none other than John Bolton. He's the guy with that mustache, got the big white mustache thing. He was Donald Trump's intel individual, sort of the Tulsi Gabbard, if you will, when Donald Trump was in his first term, clear back in 2016. Well, it turns out that Donald Trump fired John Bolton because, as we learn, John Bolton was a war hawk. Now, I hate using those words, but his cure for everything is let's bomb everybody. He was a very, very aggressive individual who wanted to, start wars and bomb people. And I'll tell you what, there's a whole lot of people that will tell you the exact same thing. There's a fellow by the name of Mark Levin, the attorney, the great one. Mark Levin said he's known Bolton for over 20 years, and he knows exactly that's the mentality he has. Trump doesn't like going to war. Apparently, he likes settling wars, get things straightened out. He's shown he can do it. So now, John Bolton was fired. But as it turns out, a grand jury in, I believe it was Virginia, indicted John Bolton on not one, not two, but 18 counts. He had all kinds of classified, highly classified, top secret stuff, SC stuff. That's really high secret stuff in his possession at home. And he was telling members of his family, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what's happening here. Here's what's happening there. Divulging top secret information to other people they called Person A and Person B. But that was the deal going on. So John Bolton right now, he has pleaded not guilty himself because he said, hey, I can do this. I was the head of the DNI. Was is the operative term. What was he doing with all these top secret documents in his possession? Normally he would have as part of his job, but you don't say anything to anybody. You don't divulge stuff. He was doing it. 18 counts. That's pretty serious, folks. So now you got James Comey, the former FBI, saying, hey, the president is being mean, he's being reactive, he's seeking revenge. You understand, if a judge says, yeah, I agree, the president was seeking revenge, everybody else that is being charged for whatever crime that comes down from this administration, everybody can say, Your Honor, hey, same thing goes for me. I'm being picked on by the president. He's seeking revenge on me. I don't care who it is. It could be a case coming up. They're going to say, revenge. If this judge goes along and says to Comey, you're right, it's revenge. And you can't charge people with that in Washington, D.C. Maybe you can in other areas, but not in D.C. So now we know James Comey's attorney says, yeah, you can't charge me because it's revenge by the president. That could lead to everybody else saying same thing. In John Bolton's case, he was fired by the president because the president doesn't like war people, doesn't like warmongers. 18 counts, felony counts. Pretty serious stuff. Now you know what's going on in Washington. Was this the end of it? Will it stop here? The answer is no. I think it's just starting. But everything hinges on what that judge says about James Comey. Was it revenge from Trump? And if it is that enough to close charges and squash the charges and say, can't charge somebody because someone's being mean? Someone is coming after someone? Revenge? Is that now a legal defense? Maybe in Washington, D.C., it just might be. Well, let me tell you a little story about promotion. And this goes clear back to the 1970s, back in the old days. Most of you probably weren't even born. But back then, I happened to see a TV show that was on during the daytime called The Merv Griffin Show. Sort of like The Tonight Show, except, well, during the day. Well, anyway, on this one particular show, he had this gentleman on. His name was Earl Woods, and he had a son, who I think was like 3 or 4 years old. But they put the kid out there with a golf club. It was a big plastic golf club, hitting these plastic golf balls. But this little 3-4-year-old kid was slamming these golf balls. I mean, they were putting them up, he'd hit them, and he'd whack the heck out of them. And you're going, whoa, that's really weird. Well, that little kid, whose father was Earl Woods, turned out to be Tiger Woods. And about 20 years later, I was on the radio at WOWO. It was April 1997, April 1997. And on that April day, I was doing a talk show. I was doing 3 to 6 in the afternoon, and that particular time was the Masters tournament. Now, back in those days, I loved to play golf. Didn't like necessarily watching it on TV, but certainly liked to play it. But I was watching the Masters because if you're a golf fan, the biggest tournaments are the Masters, the British Open, and the U.S. Open. Those you watched. Well, anyway, in 1997, I saw this Tiger Woods guy literally clean the clock of everybody at the Masters. Beat him by, double strokes. It was amazing. And for the next 20 years, I followed Tiger Woods. In whatever tournament he was in, the ticket sales went through the roof. The TV ratings were phenomenal. Whenever he played, everybody wanted to watch, whether they're in golf or not. Well, that's how Tiger Woods survived for over 20 years. Well, something else has happened in recent years. Back in the 2020, 21, 22, women's basketball was going on, the WNBA. Now, the WNBA had been around for 20-some years, and it was losing money every year, and it was just to pay homage to the women. The NBA teams were pitching in $1 million a team, and they were still losing $40 million a year. People weren't watching. You get maybe 3,000, 4,000 people a game, played in these small high school-sized gyms, and frankly, nobody really cared. But then the word came was going to be the draft was going to come out. Now, everybody thinks about the college draft. They always think about, UConn, South Carolina, Notre Dame. Well, nobody was thinking much about this Iowa team. This Iowa team had this young lady playing on it who broke every scoring record, every assist record, about every record you could think of. And nobody ever heard of her, but the Indy Fever, the Indianapolis team, they managed to get the first pick of the draft. And lo and behold, they picked this lady out of Iowa. Her name was Caitlin Clark. She was a phenom. Well, she joined the team because the WNBA plays only in the summer. Now, back in those days, 2024, the teams traveled by regular commercial airlines. Now, you imagine 12, 13 women all crammed together in coach seats, flying from city to city, airport to airport, catching things like you and I do? It's a mess. Well, suddenly this Caitlin Clark comes along, and she's a phenom. She's scoring everywhere on the court. The Fever were supposed to be a nothing team. She had got them into playoffs, no less. Well, what happened was security said, hey, we got to protect this little lady, this Caitlin Clark. She's a phenom, and we need to make some changes. Well, the rest of the women in the WNBA have been playing for years and pretty much in nondescript. Nobody knew who they were. Nobody cared. But now, suddenly they're riding on chartered jets because that's how they got around now. Man, that was living large. Of course, they're only making about $76,000 a year during the off season. Had to go work someplace else to, well, pay the rent, if you will, because the WNBA was a losing league. But Caitlin Clark, this lady comes in, and suddenly she starts drawing massive amounts of attention. I mean, teams had to go to different venues to play the games when the Fever were in town. Down in Indianapolis, every time they go to Gainbridge to play a game, they sold the house out. I mean, 18, 19,000 people. People wanted to see this girl. She was a phenom, sort of like Tiger Woods was. Well, problem was the WNBA, they let her get beat up because a lot of the ladies in the WNBA were very jealous, did not like her, did not like the fact she was there. Well, she wasn't one of them. So they beat her up and ultimately put her out of the game. But during that time, you kind of started looking at the WNBA because all the games they were playing. You start seeing other players on the team too, like Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hull rather. Suddenly you're seeing other players going, hey, they're pretty cool. Well, the problem is this. Caitlin Clark has gone through her second year. She only played 13 games in 2025, but she was there, but the fans were still there to see her, still there to get autographs, still hoping she would come back. But in the meantime, the team worked out pretty good. I mean, made it virtually the semifinals of the championship with a put-together team. But the league, what did they do about Caitlin Clark? Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. Yeah, she got a tremendous $28 million Nike contract, which I think she could have had a whole lot more. But she became considered the best of the best. But did the league really promote her and put her mainstay and make her the main thing of the league? For what reason? No. Well, here it was recently announced that she had been invited to play in a golf tournament that she'd been in previously by Ms. Corda and some other lady golfers, great lady golfers. An event down in Tampa, Florida on November 11th, 12th, somewhere around that area. She was invited to play. When that was announced that Caitlin Clark was going to be playing in a Pro-Am tournament, the ticket sales for this event went through the roof. Media coverage went through the roof because the LPGA said, hey, we got a big star playing at our event. Let's promote the heck out of this. And they are, and they did. And because of that, it suddenly has become a big event. Caitlin Clark playing golf? She knows how to play golf, folks. She does. I mean, she knows how to play pretty much everything, but golf too. So she's going down playing this event. Tickets have gone through the roof. Everybody wants a ticket. Media wants to cover it. And the LPGA says, we're going to outmarket this lady who really doesn't belong to us. She belongs to the WNBA. We're going to use her to market our product. And they did. Well, WNBA's got a big problem, folks. A big problem. They could see a strike coming up the end of this month. Who knows what's going on? The Fever? Well, apparently they're going to keep Caitlin Clark, and they're going to keep Miss Cunningham and Miss Null. At least those three, maybe more. and try to get a championship for Indianapolis. But marketing has been the most important part. The WNBA, in my opinion, has done a poor job of marketing Caitlin. And frankly, the LPGA knew what they had and knew how to use it to make them even bigger. So now you'll probably be watching that golf tournament in November, the Pro-Am, seeing Caitlin Clark play, and we'll be watching the WNBA next year. We don't even know if they're going to have games. A lot depends on what happens. But right now, it's a matter of marketing. Who did the better job of marketing, the LPGA or the WNBA, in my opinion? The LPGA ran circles around the WNBA because they don't realize what they have, and what they did have, they attempted to destroy. That's the problem, that jealousy gets you. That's the problem, that anger, well, with some people because they don't like someone else coming in and taking over their spot. Well, that's how it worked out. Now you understand something about marketing. The pro golf people knew about it when Tiger Woods came along. Too bad the WNBA is not using it properly like they should, involving a phenom of our time, Caitlin Clark.